Hey, welcome to the Restoration Soul Care Podcast, where we have honest conversations about faith, neuroscience, and hope. I'm Michael Kamber, a relationship and recovery coach.
And I'm Nick Buddha, a mental health and relationship coach. If you feel stuck in shame, addiction, or pain, you don't have to face it alone. Join us for some real stories, real tools, and a real path forward. Let's dive in.
Matt, it's good to see you, dude. Welcome back to the Restoration Soul Care Podcast is what I should say. I'm today with my dear friend, Matt Fisher. Matt is a person who offers care. What do you call yourself?
I'm a care pastor. So at Hill City Church in Richmond, Virginia, my technical title is care pastor. I'm kind of like in-house spiritual director, soul care provider, pastoral counselor. I always say I'm the one-on-one guy. I preach occasionally, but I'm more of the I'm the troll that hides in his office and talks to people about their trauma or whatever.
Yeah. So something landed from the sermon this week. Can I process that with you?
Sure.
And it's like,
100%.
3 minutes in, you're like, oh gosh,
Yeah,
we're in the weeds. Yeah.
That's it. See, I was already so ready. You said those words and it like triggered me into like, yes, let's do that. Michael, what was the sermon?
Yeah. Not me. I was dealing in hypotheticals. I don't have problems.
Yeah. I noticed that it's a lot of people it's a lot of people who sometimes it's stuff going on at church or like, I heard this thing in a sermon I want to process. Our head pastor here, John, is really good at being accessible for the size church we are. So he will, like, if people have questions or whatever about the sermon, he's pretty good at like connecting. For me, it's more of like it's two categories mostly. It's I don't trust clinical therapy, so I'm going to come talk to a pastor, and then I sneaky do some psychology with them. Or the other big sort of group is I've been in therapy and counseling, and most of the time they're like not having a bad experience, but they're just like, I'm still stuck in this area, so I feel like I need some spiritual guidance. And I feel like that's what soul care is like in a lot of ways.
And same for me, man. I love that sort of I don't know if you want to call it a blend, but like it's like we're informed by psychology and like we understand trauma and like we've got a lot of training and stuff in there, but it's also like we bring the spiritual element to bear on that because we believe that God is deeply involved in our souls and our bodies and our heads and our hearts. And so there's this beautiful overlap where like, psychology has given us some really great categories and language and frameworks for a lot of stuff, but it's like God is deeply involved in every bit of that. And so it's I don't know about you. I don't know if a lot of people call it fun. I really enjoy.
Yeah, I know. It's the weirdest kind of fun.
Yeah. It's like I sort of get to play detective, but then I sort of get to like help lead you to things that are, that are going to feel like big discoveries. And then when you notice it, you're like, light bulbs go off.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going with all this, but
no, it is fun. Well, and I think it's interesting because it's this emerging. It's funny. It's like both an ancient thing, spiritual direction, right? It's kind of the original. It's proto-psychology, but now it's like this emerging thing that people are looking for. Like even the amount of non-Christians I see is wild. I even have one client that's Muslim and he comes and talks to me, and it's like people are looking for something that we're providing as soul care people. And it's funny when you say it's fun. I would agree. I think it is fun. And do you have an Aura ring? Do you have one of these?
No, but I think about it every day. I just haven't pulled the trigger.
I got one. It's been almost 2 years and jury's still sort of out as to whether it's good for me or not. It's like, it's kind of that, are you stressing about your stress? But one thing that it showed me was when I'm in session, my biometrics are at their most like regulated, which is crazy. Because the thing is, you sit there and listen to somebody's like really hard stuff, you would be elevated but my most like relaxed moments of the day via the Aura Ring data is actually like when I'm in session with people. So it is a weird kind of fun.
Well, what I'm hearing is that when clients come and see you for help, really this is for Matt, not for them.
Yeah, it's really all about me. I'm a 4 on the Enneagram, so I have a really easy time making it about me somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. And your Aura ring backs that up with data, hard
That's
data.
right. That's right. So it's a fact. It's a scientific fact that I am an egomaniac.
It's proven. I love that's great, man. I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up because it's just this dumb thing that Nick and I always do. Actually, Nick started this. I didn't want to even go there, but Nick constantly like makes this an issue. Matt, the first time that we met, what I noticed about you is you had a jacket on with a bunch of pins, and I was like, that dude's got a Ninja Turtle pin on his jacket. I should probably go talk to him. And,
it was such a low-key Ninja Turtle pin too, and you caught it.
But I saw it. And this was not even in like we were doing a training, soul care training.
Yeah.
And I saw that. I was like, oh, I should probably go talk to that guy. He's probably cool. We're probably going to be friends. And then I did. I don't know. We got lost in conversation about Ninja Turtles or something. And then that's been 2 or 3 years ago. And here we are.
Yeah. Half of your assumption was true. We did become friends, but I'm not as cool as you maybe thought I was.
Well,
Jerry's out. It was. You are the only person. I owned that pin. A friend gave it to me. A fellow Ninja Turtle head gave it to me, and I owned it. Still own it. Probably for like 8 or 9 years, almost a decade. And you were the only person who ever, for the audience, it was literally, it's like not like a button that you make in a button maker, but it was like an enamel, like an engraved enamel pin. And it was simply a manhole cover, a New York City manhole cover, but it had the turtles' names engraved around the outside, and Michael spotted it.
Yeah, in a room of about 20-ish people.
Yeah,
from about 15 feet away. It's like I have a turtle radar. Obviously, that's what it went off, and I was like, oh,
that's awesome.
So yeah. Anywho, I don't get to connect on a nerdy level with a lot of people in this profession. I think Nick throws me. We'll say he pushes me in front of traffic in that capacity because he'll always bring up things like that, and I'm always wearing Ninja Turtle socks for a good reason. But
yeah.
Anyway, glad to have the overlap between the work, the interest, and the hobby even.
Yeah. Well, so I'm sorry. You said that we were going to be low agenda. So if you picked the right guest for rabbit trails, I often have joked, and the more I joke about it, the more it becomes maybe a serious idea. You could maybe Restoration Soul Care could get in on this, of having like kind of like nerd soul care, meaning I was reading some stuff about Jung and like his whole thing about archetypes and symbolism and I mean, what is Star Wars, Ninja Turtles, Marvel, Lord of the Rings for sure, especially Christian world, Lord of the Rings, Narnia. What are those other than like our myths, right? Like Christians for most of Christianity, especially in Catholic history, like during medieval times and stuff, they really use, like, if you ever read like Milton or Dante, Milton, like all these guys, they are blending a lot of Greek mythology because that was just the academic thing of the time. Like, they blend it with biblical stories and theology to try to get thoughts out of people and to try to like make you think. And I've often thought, like, could you pitch a form of spiritual direction or soul care that's like, hey, do you like pop culture stuff? Like, let's just do that. Let's talk about which Ninja Turtle, like, who do you see yourself as? Are you you could do Enneagram work around it. You could do, who do you look up to?
I've already typed all of the turtles, my friend. That's been done. That work has been done.
And like, one thing I ask people a lot is like, who do you, when you're talking about like, what's your vision for your life or what are your goals or especially in the work of like unwanted sexual behaviors, porn addiction, these things, we'll get into this. It has to be about identity. It can't just be about behavior control all the time. Like you say, delayed sobriety, which is, I got from you, is like my favorite thing in the world. It can't just be delayed sobriety. It has to be a real heart change. And so when we talk about who do you want to be, the churchy answer is more like Jesus. Yes, for sure. But like, is there like, I want to be Gandalf. That's all. I just want to get old and have a long beard and know things. And that's since I was 6 or 7 years old, I've been attracted to like the Gandalfs and the Yodas and the Splinters. I want to be that guy, you know, like asking people, okay, so when you think about who do you want to be, like what characters as a kid, who were you on the playground, right? Like who did you try to be, or who did you want to be? And how
Yeah.
does that play into like your vision for your life as you're trying to move through unwanted behaviors and stuff? Because if you don't have that, if you don't have a who you're aspiring to be, even if it's a fictional, you know, even if it's a archetype, I want to be the sage or the warrior or the, you know, whatever. I actually think that there's like a weird, it's not just like fun overlap. I think that there's like maybe some serious work that could be done there, especially living in a world where those are the primary sort of avatars of our subconscious now are Captain America and Michelangelo and Luke Skywalker and, you know, Frodo.
I think that makes a lot of sense because the archetypes don't exist independent of a story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we, you know, all of life is story. We see ourselves in stories, which is, I think, what is so transformative about Scripture is that it invites you out of your story for a moment and to view yourself in the larger context of God's redemptive story, which ultimately leads us to, you know, faith in Christ, right? But I think that the other thing is also true is like when we can involve ourselves in a narrative, whether that be Star Wars or Ninja Turtles or what have you, and let's say buy into that, identify with that archetype in that narrative for a bit. What it can do is it can afford you hope, or maybe you would say borrowing hope when you don't see a path forward. And whether or not you look at this, you know, some people might listen to this conversation and go, "Oh, this is a silly conversation that doesn't mean much," and like that's fine. You can think that. But like, I meet with a lot of guys who don't have hope and who can't just manufacture a vision for the future, and they have to be able to see that, which is why, you know, there's this part. I didn't make this term up. I heard Rich talk about this. So he said judicious self-disclosure. There's a part of the work that we do when we show up for people in the counseling room where we share parts of our stories, not for the sake of our own healing, but for the sake of inviting people into some of the work that we've already done so that they can see themselves have a path forward when they don't see it. And it's freeing, and it what's the thing, the cross point thing they always say, right? The best gift that you have to give anybody is your transformed and transforming presence. Yes, that's true in all of life, but it's especially true in the counseling room when you're sitting with someone and you're trying to explore how you got to where you are today. And when you say, well, where do you want to go? Where do you want to be in 6 months, in 2 years? And they go, I don't know, not here. Like, that's great. I get that. But like, we concretely have to get out of the vague, and we have to put actual steps in place to get you there, right? Not for the sake of just changing the behavior, but for the sake of engaging our heart and affecting that deep and lasting change so that we can then move on to where we want to be.
Yeah, and I think that so much of that, I would love your thoughts on this, because you do more targeted, like most of what I do with people around, again, unwanted sexual patterns, porn addiction. Most of what I do with people, I learn from listening to you.
Okay.
At least recently. I mean, you know, I've read Unashamed and or Unwanted and the books. Probably we've read the same books, but I think you have this great way of being, you know, targeted and step by step with it. Whereas I tend to get off into the ethereal, too philosophical, like we're doing right now. But I think that when it comes to this idea of it's a lack of imagination. I can't imagine who I'd be without this. I don't know. You know, it's when Jesus says, do you want to get well? He wasn't trying to be a jerk. He was like, look, if I heal you and you can see, you got to go get a job and you got to like manage your relationships. Like you can't just sit here and beg for money anymore. Not that I know you don't love doing that, but I'm inviting you into like, what could your life be if if you woke up tomorrow and had no desire to look at porn, who would you be? You know,
what would you do?
Right. What would you do? Yeah. What would you do then? And, you know, I often will will talk to guys about their imagination. This is at the core of it. This is a misuse of your imagination. It's an abuse of the same muscle in your brain, or the same neuropathways in your brain that, again, caused you as a 7-year-old to pick up a lightsaber and want to fight with another kid on the playground, or that
Right.
made you want to dress up for, Halloween as Donatello. That's now been hijacked, by pornography. And at the same time, it's also stunted your ability to imagine who you could be. You can't be Spider-Man. There's no radioactive spider that's going to give you superpowers, but you could be a better version of yourself. And I will tell people, or I'll ask guys a lot of the time, where is your imagination nourished? Do you still like, do you watch Stranger Things, or do you when you journal, do you ever write poetry, or do you play Dungeons and Dragons? Do you play fantasy football? Do you where is your imagination being nourished rather than hijacked? And a lot of the times, especially for guys of a certain age and a certain stage of life, they're like, it's not. It's work. It's, work. It's family. It's little kids, And so I think that there is some probably heavier relevance to this, what are you into? This Ninja Turtles thing, right? Than maybe we give credit to.
Yeah. You're reminding me. I'm not going to remember the name of the account. That there's a guy I follow on Instagram. The prompt of every single video, or the hook, is, my roommate is a clinical psychologist and a huge Ninja Turtle fan. And so he'll be folding clothes, and he peppers him, hey, if Donatello were to have a compulsive behavior, what would it be? And then there's a 4-minute rant around what that might be.
I love that.
And it's actually pretty interesting. It's not just, nonsense, I guess. But
yeah.
I mean, it is nonsense, but it's informed nonsense.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, man, that's good. You use the word hijacked. And I think that's the right word. I use that a lot, and I think it's really illustrative for guys to see, because what's underneath that, the implication is that you have a process or a system in place that is good, that God designed for a reason to help you function well in life, in your own capacity, in relationship with others. And it gets distorted and twisted and hijacked and to be misused for another nefarious purpose that is damaging to you, damaging to your relationships, and damaging how you see yourself, right? And that's, I think, in big part how shame gets all bound up in this. Because the second that shame gets bound up in it, it suddenly reduces your capacity to recognize, oh, this is not good for me, I want to do something else. It turns inward and says, oh, hey, did you know that you're a piece of crap and that you're not worth putting in the energy or effort to changing anything significant about your life? And then you go, well, I don't hear anybody else's voice telling me anything different, so that must be true. And we get stuck in the weeds of, it feels less risky to stay stuck in the shame that we know than to try to engage our imagination for something better. Because that's risky, because I don't know what that is, and I don't know what it could be, and God might be inviting me to something that I don't necessarily want to do, or that might make me uncomfortable. And I don't want to confront that. Does that make sense?
No, that's really good. Yeah, that's really good. Do you, what are your thoughts? And you guys have maybe done, I haven't listened to every episode, so maybe you guys have already talked about this, but do you have a sort of triage for people, or triage isn't the right word. You know how people, so I grew up around recovery culture, substance abuse recovery culture. And there's, especially now with Narcan, and now they're doing a lot of research around how they can adjust GLP-1s to stop your desire for alcohol and drugs, and these sort of step down, we'll call them step down interventions, where it's well, you're getting off heroin, now you're going to do methadone for a while, and the hope is, or the example I always use is, if you go to an AA meeting, usually there's people out front smoking cigarettes, chain smoking cigarettes. It's you don't want to do that for the rest of your life, but there's kind of a step down. When it comes to porn and sex addiction, What are your thoughts around like the sort of concept of a step down? Like, hey, if you transfer some of that escapism, you obviously are trying to have like a security blanket, a pacifier, right? Like to make you feel better in the moment. Um, Transferring some of that energy to like, I don't know, play video games or like go for a run, do something else, do some slightly healthier version of avoidance or escapism. Because at the end of the day, binge watching your Batman the Animated Series DVDs instead of watching porn is still a step in the right direction, maybe. Or is your take more like, yeah, let's just get to the root of this thing and like pull it out?
I think the answer to both of those questions is the same thing, at least in my strategy with guys. Yeah, and I have to be careful with this because objectively, you binge watching Batman the Animated Series is not inherently sinful, like engaging with pornography at any level. And your spouse probably won't be bothered in the same way you watch Batman as if you were watching porn or something like that. So there is some nuance there. I'm paying attention though. Like, let me say this: the step down is pushing people toward healthy relationships because I'm cognizant and paying attention to where behavior shifts, especially after the first 2 or 3 times that I've met with somebody and they're telling me they're making some progress. I'm like, all right, well, what else is pulling your attention? And sometimes I'll use the word arousal. What is arousing your attention to go to that when things get hard or painful? Because for a long time, if guys have used porn compulsively for a long time or any compulsive thing, whether that's substance abuse, like that's kind of like a crutch. It's functionally doing something for you. And if we just come up and kick that out, well, you're going to hold yourself up somehow.
Yeah.
And we have to be careful that we don't put something else worse there or put something else there that might just be a substitute that we can just sort of trade out with porn, tomorrow if we feel like it. So, and that was true of my story. Briefly, when I walked away from porn, I didn't go back, but good Lord, did I go heavy into social media. And like that was a heavy part of my day, was just scrolling nonstop, and across 3 or 4 social media apps. So, objectively, like, yeah, I'm not using porn anymore, but it's like, all right, but I am severely distracting myself for a good part of my day for a very long time, for years even. And I was aware that it's problematic, but I didn't realize like what the trade-off was there. So here, what I specifically do, and we've talked about it on a few episodes, and it's part of this free resource that I give away, the Quit Porn Quick Start Guide. You can download that at the website. I might as well plug it, rscky.com/quickstart. And one of the frameworks in there is the SEEDS framework, and I'm sure you've heard of that before. Cliff talks about it. Crosspoint trains people on it. But that is sort of the down step. If we're because what pornography does in that hijacked place is send you after the dopamine chase in an exaggerated way. So the step down from that is to engage in activities and behaviors that are that give you normal levels of dopamine, not exaggerated, not diminished, sort of normal range of dopamine. And it's when we can consistently put people to those things, and consistency over time is what creates the change. So there's that. But I'm also aware of like, your brain knows that doesn't give you the same juice for the squeeze. So what else are you putting back in there? Are you now doing the normal things that we've discussed, sort of transferring to, and sort of using porn intermittently? Or did that transfer to something else? Are you, spending 6 hours a day in video games? Are you what's the thing? Where did that transfer to? If the answer is nothing, okay, good. But let's not just ignore that. Let's keep paying attention to it as we keep working the seeds. And briefly, the SEEDS is an acronym, SEEDS, social and spiritual connection. How am I connecting well with other real relationships in real life? How am I connecting with the Lord? E is education. What am I learning about myself, right? That's the work that you and I do with people, is helping them learn things about themselves. And I said, I cross it into education about the thing we're trying to overcome too. So if you're trying to get through a pornography addiction, what are you learning about it? podcast, books,
Yeah.
working with a coach. Like, what am I learning about the thing? The next E is exercise. You have to move your body for optimal health, just in general. But it's also good. I forget who. Dr. Mark Hyman. He's a functional nutritionist at Cleveland Clinic. I saw this quote from him not too long ago. He said that the brain and body process pain or process trauma or something at 3 miles per hour. So walking, and bonus, if you're walking with someone and talking, your brain and body are doing a whole lot of good stuff there to process stuff. So move your body. The D is diet. You got to eat good food because that's what your body uses to replenish and refuel itself. And then sleep. Sleep affects every single thing, your hormones and how you function the next day. So you line all those things up. You're at a baseline, you're just going to feel better physically. But two, those are normal range of dopamine inducing activities. So that to answer your question, that was a very long way of answering your question.
No, that's good.
What's the step down? That's what I'm stepping down into is not necessarily specific activity, but I'm specifically stepping down into things that aren't like rage level dopamine. Does that make sense?
That's really good. Yeah, that's really good. And understanding that, especially when it comes to stuff like video games, even I'd love your take on this. I've even noticed like excessive or obsessive exercise. Going to the gym so much, your relationships suffer because you're trying to meet that extra, not the good base level dopamine of a 40-minute exercise a day or whatever, an hour a day, but you're trying to meet that excessive dopamine hit. Video games definitely do that. Probably binge watching the same cartoon or show isn't good for you, but doesn't necessarily provide an excessive dopamine hit. It's more the scrolling, the reels, stuff like that. But no, that's really good. It's just understanding that the step down is more about re-regulating your dopamine receptors than it is about like, well, it's better to play video games than watch porn, so just do that instead.
Yeah. And my favorite thing about that is that it's totally something that you have control over. Because a lot of time when we get stuck in any compulsive behavior, our experience of that is that I don't have control. I can't just quit this. Like, I'm stuck here. And that may be true for some reasons in some situations, but a lot of the time when I just sort of reaffirm people like, hey, you actually have some decision-making capacity and some agency in this. Like, what would you rather be doing? And they have an answer pretty quick. Well, I'd rather be doing this. Like, oh, okay, well, how do you think you could engage that daily instead of just defaulting to this? Well, I bet I could do this, this, and this. I'm like, oh, cool. And I check back in with them next week, and I'm like, how'd that go? Well, the first few times I was able to go do this other thing I wanted to do. I still went back to porn, but I did it a couple times. I'm like, hey, that's progress, right?
That's good.
That's a big deal.
That's good. That's good.
Well, what have you seen? Like, I know, like I'm sure you've come across people in your office who have had some sort of compulsive behavior, even if it's not pornography. But what have you seen? What have you experienced? What have you found helpful for people to explore in their own stories or in their own work?
Yeah. Well, like we've kind of already covered, I think exploring that imagination piece of it. Again, I'm a 4 on the Enneagram for whatever that's worth. So I do tend to ask the question, like, how could creative outlets and beauty and, deeper thinking help here? So definitely asking that imagination question. Who do you want to be? How do you get there? How do you form a vision for your life? Because I think, which you guys talk about this, at the core of it, if it's only about what you do, if it's only about the behavior, it's almost always a delayed sobriety. If it's about who you want to be, then we can see sustainable change, for sure. One thing I don't know if you see this ever, but one thing I deal with a lot is, it's no surprise to anybody who engages in this kind of content, listens to your podcast, reads these books, that like one of the big bads of this whole thing is shame, right? A lot of talk about shame, Kurt Thompson and all those guys. So one of the things that I've found interesting in my work the last few years here at the church is the role that shame plays in taking what is probably objectively the occasional use of pornography, and turning it into a pornography addiction, because we know that, especially as Christians, we don't ever want to engage in it. But I'll get guys coming into my office and being like, "Hey, I'm here to talk about my porn addiction." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, tell me about it. Like, what's the frequency like? What's your experience?" And he's like, "About once a week." And I'm like, "Okay, that's hard." I don't laugh at him or anything, but I'm like, there last guy that I talked to, it was like 3 times a day. He's like, what, looking at it in his car. Or some guys, it's even like, yeah, I just have this about once a month, I get stressed out. And so some of it, a lot of the work that I've found myself doing, kind of to my surprise, is orienting people toward an agreed upon set of terms. What is addiction? What is unwanted repeated behavior? How do you heal from and broach your once a month use of this coping mechanism, and healing from it without it becoming oh, well, it's not that bad on the one side. There's ditches on each side of the road. Well, it's not that bad, and we don't want that. But also, we don't want the, like, I'm in the exact same place as a guy who watches it 2 hours a day and whose marriage is falling apart. And like, sort of helping people reorient themselves toward what the actual behavior is, and away from all of the shame and all of the, all of the burden of how they feel about their coping mechanisms, and really just understanding, like, this is an unwanted coping mechanism. That's what sin is. It's just taking a good thing and turning it in on itself. A good thing like sex, and making it, overextending it into not goodness. A good thing like technology that helps us every day, and turning it into not goodness. A good thing like your imagination, like your desire, like all of these things, and turning it into not goodness. They're it's funny. I don't know if you do this a lot of the time, especially with the shame thing. I'll get guys into their story, and a lot of the time my response that gets a reaction out of them, or that gets them to have a little bit of a heart posture change, my response will be, of course this is what's happening. Like, now that you're telling me your story, like, how else would you do it? Like, given the factors, of course this is what's happening. And, especially when you're in that sort of ordained role or pastoral role, most of the time they're coming in for confession and flagellation. Tell me how bad I am, and tell me that, this isn't what God wants for me, and then I'm going to go to hell if I don't stop. And so when I go, yeah, man, like, of course this is the pattern, it kind of, oh, well, okay, what do you mean? And then, yeah, we start to do the work.
Yeah. It's like you're giving validation, like you're giving an alternate voice, or maybe a competing voice, to the narrative that's been running in their head, which says you experience pain and everything is fine. Mm-hmm. When in reality is, you experience pain, life is hard, and of course you have a coping mechanism. Mm-hmm. Because you're not perfect, and you can't tolerate all of life's shenanigans and just sort of power through it all of the time. Like, you just can't. Well, of course you develop some sort of unhealthy dependency on a substance or a compulsive behavior or some sort of sexual compulsion or something. But yeah, I mean, that's my experience too. The majority of people that reach out to me use some variation of the phrase, "I have a porn addiction, please help." Mm-hmm. And it doesn't, I mean, that's the first question. What's your frequency like? What's your ritual like? How often are you using? And it's like, yeah, a few times a year. I'm like, okay, that's agreed, a problem, but we're not going to call that an addiction.
Right. Yeah. Out of respect for addiction. Right. I tell people that a lot. Right. Like, let me tell you, and it's always prefacing with, like, my intent in sharing this with you is to is for you to gain perspective, not to feel better or worse about what's going on. I'll often tell guys, especially, the freedom of getting older, the freedom of adulthood is that you can move out of your black and white. As a kid, you need to know this is right, this is wrong. If I do this, I'm a bad boy. If I do this, I'm a good boy. If I do this, if I do X, I get a gold star. If I do Y, I get a red mark, right? You need that. Like, we all need that. But the freedom of adulthood is being able to move beyond that into simply asking the question, is this what you want? How's that working for you? And I'll often tell guys, like, look, you can't feel bad enough to do better.
Yeah. Say that again. That's it.
You can't feel bad enough to do better, especially in this, because it's the cycle. You're on the water wheel. You fill up with guilt and shame, and then you empty it out in front of the porn or the unwanted sexual behavior. And then it fills up again because you feel bad about it. And then you empty it, and so, I'll say to guys a lot that pithy line, you can't feel bad enough to do better. And so how are we going to stop feeling bad and start becoming who we want to be?
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, I think that's it. Being able to understand, it's really hard to receive, and especially if you work with Christians a lot, or anybody really from any religious background, but certainly people who some form of sort of, we'll call it cosmic morality, as a part of their framework or their worldview. They keep wondering why they won't be delivered from it. How can God love me through this? I know God loves me, but I just feel XYZ and I can't stop. And I think that the stabilizing effect of compassion from a spiritual director, soul care provider, mentor, friend, intentional spiritual friend, of just being able to say, like, yeah, of course this is what's happening. More guilt and shame is not going to get you closer to the Lord, but you're also not going to get closer to the Lord until you lay down that stuff that's making you do this. And then you see real change. I had a guy one day tell me, I don't understand why this is still a problem. I got saved when I was, in college. And I said, saved from what? Sometimes I'll act like a moron, like I'm not a pastor and I don't know all the Christianese, Saved, well, what do you mean? Saved from what? And he's like, from like sin and shame and hell. I'm like, okay, well, then why are we here? It's like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, maybe you need to answer the question, what were you really trying to get saved from? Not just these big, theological or existential things. What are the specific things that you would like to be saved from? Or when you were 19 and you did that altar call, what were you really looking to get healed from? And sometimes starting there, especially for folks that at least profess to be very connected to their faith, can be really helpful.
Yeah. I'm also really intrigued by how, I don't mean this in a demeaning way, a lot of people are sort of going on autopilot. We're not paying attention to what we're doing day in and day out and how that's influenced by not explicit beliefs, but implicit beliefs. Mm-hmm. Things that we are, the fuel that's running the engine, that we're not watching the combustion happen. We just know that we're moving. Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting when we shine some light on that, because really all it takes is, I say sometimes, like with clients, I'm holding up a mirror. What are you seeing? Mm-hmm. As I'm talking through their story? And oftentimes it's like, I've never looked at that before. I've never seen that before. And it's not because people are avoiding the things necessarily, though sometimes we are, but a lot of it is, I just haven't slowed down long enough to be curious about what's there. Because a lot of times shame says, well, you don't actually want to see what's there because it's worse than you probably think it is. Mm-hmm. And again, sometimes it is, but sometimes it's like, no, what we're really after in this is for you to, how'd they say it? See yourself the way God sees you. Mm-hmm. Fully and yet still loved. and I say this phrase to guys all the time. God knows.
Mm-hmm.
God knows. He knows. He's
Mm-hmm.
intimately involved in all of the weeds and the details of every single thing that you have going on, all of your imperfections, all of your limits, all of your losses, all of your compulsive behaviors. And yet in Christ, he still moves towards you.
Mm-hmm.
Like that oftentimes is the weight lifting off our shoulders. We can go, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I am known.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's the foundation from which I work out of, not the other thing which is what maybe you hear this too, where guys go, man, I can't do this thing until I got to get a couple weeks of sobriety under my belt so I can go back to church, or I can't ask that girl out, or I can't propose until I'm, 6 months sober. And like, I'm not saying that's not important. Sobriety is important, but ultimately, like if you are just trying to white knuckle your way through that just so you can get to the next thing, it's probably not going to happen, at least not in the way that you want it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's my question. What are you not paying attention to?
Yeah, that's really good. It's funny. I had a conversation one time with an older guy that goes to church here, and he was kind of getting on this thing about Richmond is kind of a hippy dippy. It's a college town, so it's a lot of coffee shops, a lot of tarot card readers, whatever. And the Richmond school system was trying to implement a like mindfulness thing for elementary school kids. And he was sort of upset, like, well, they won't do the 10 Commandments in school. And this is like, this is New Ageism and stuff like that. And I was telling him, I was like, to your point about paying attention, being curious, I was like, look, having a yoga instructor or something come in and start teaching kindergartners to fourth graders how to just be mindful, how to notice themselves, like how to notice their bodies and like how to ground themselves and breathe and stuff. I understand your concerns, but I tell you what, it makes my job a lot easier when they end up in my office. And I very rarely ever talk to people who are like, well, I accepted Jesus and then I started going to yoga. I much more often talk to people who don't know how to be in connection with their own bodies, who don't notice themselves, who don't notice why they do the things, who aren't mindful, who don't have any basic understanding of like, what is it to pay attention to what's going on in me. And so we kind of laughed about it. I mean, it wasn't like an argument, but I was like, yeah, I don't know. I think teaching us from a younger age to just notice ourselves, to pay attention to ourselves, to notice what's stirring within us. I'd probably get it any way I could get it as a counselor.
Yeah. It's never going to adversely affect you to get more oxygen to your brain and in your body.
Totally. Yeah. That's really good. Something I say to guys that, you were talking about kind of like God always wanting to draw closer to you. When I'm trying to poke through that shame barrier, trying to get some light in there is, I'll tell them, if your reward for a life well lived and a life following Jesus, if your reward is heaven, your heavenly reward, right? That's where your soul goes. That's where your spirit goes when your body dies, is this perfect place we call heaven. It's like, well, if the Holy Spirit, if Christ resides in you, or is meant to, if when you accepted Jesus, you were inviting him into your heart, that leads me to believe that maybe you were intended to be God's heaven, where his spirit went when he was good, which he always is. And I'll ask him, can you accept that you're heaven to God? And that when you do these things, you're creating a hell for him? And they're like, wow, I don't know. They have that Rich talks a lot about a good Christian anthropology starting in Genesis 1 when it was good, very good, not starting in Genesis 3 when things go wrong. And I'll do or say almost anything short of straight up, blasphemy, to try to get people to understand, like, you were made good. Cliff said that to me one time, you were made good. And so I tell him, I'm like, maybe you're not this albatross around God's neck. Maybe you're the heaven that God created for himself to go to. And it's in avoiding that you're doing all these behaviors. Um, and sometimes that gets them to cry. My big thing is getting them to cry.
Yeah.
People are like, I'm
goal,
sorry, I'm
it?
so emotional. I'm like, dude, if you leave my office and you didn't cry, I feel like I didn't do my job.
Yeah. I was joking one time when I first started this. I didn't do this intentionally, but it seemed like I had this formula of like 2 or 3 questions that if I could get you to sit with and answer them honestly, like it's 10 out of 10 times you're going to cry.
Yeah.
So I've learned that I don't do that on purpose. But it's like, I know it's coming. Like if I have to ask you this question, it's like, there's tissues right next to you, buddy.
Let's go. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're a little over, but there's, for me, the last thought here is around what is our job specifically as, or what's my job, I guess. I won't put that on you, but as specifically this thing, a soul care provider, like a pastor, a spiritual director, not a therapist, right? I'm not a therapist. And I think one of the hardest things for people to accept and for me to communicate and for me to accept on a day-to-day basis is that when when I say to you, you deserved to have your dad or a man in your life sit down and go, son, this is what it is. Here's a healthy view of sex and sexuality and what it is to be a man. And your response is, yeah, but like, my dad wasn't my dad wasn't such a bad guy. I hear that a lot, more often than I hear like, here's all my trauma. When it comes to this, it's like, yeah, my parents did the best they could. They were great. Nothing to complain about. Okay, fair. Like my job is not to get you to complain about your parents, but you deserve to have. Did anybody ever sit you down? Did any man in your life ever sit you down and level with you about what integrity in this area looks like? And they're like, no, I don't think that they knew to do that. I don't think that they had that kind of maturity. Did yours? And I'm like, no, not really. And most people didn't. But that doesn't mean that you weren't made for that. That doesn't mean that you weren't owed it in some way. And so when that didn't happen, of course, this is what happened. And so trying to get people to hold the tension of you were made good, very good. And the first thing that wasn't good was that you were alone. And so God created other people, women, but other people. And that the result of Genesis 3, the result of all of us living in a broken world of sin, is that we were made for something. And most of us don't get that thing. And I think that's the real, like, therapist can't, and a good therapist wouldn't say that. And so I really see that as like my core, if there's a core driver for me in this work, especially as it has to do with like unwanted behavior stuff, it's you were made for this. And just because nobody gets it or most people don't get it doesn't mean it's not what you were made for.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's beautiful. And I think that that's insanely important because what you're poking at with that idea is people's own sense of worthiness.
mm-hmm.
And when people don't believe they're worthy of the work, of the goodness of their humanity, then it creates all kinds of havoc.
Mm-hmm.
And it will dramatically, that's where shame comes in, and it will dramatically distort your disorder, we might say. It'll disorder your
mm-hmm.
capacity to grow and thrive and live as the way that God created you to. So, dude, I think that's beautiful. I might steal that.
Steal it. So I'm very open source.
Yeah, same. Yeah. Well, dude, listen, thank you again for this. I deeply appreciate your time today and just to be able to talk and just kick some stuff around. You're one of my favorite people. And the second that I asked you almost a year ago now, coming up on it, that I said, hey, Matt, I'm starting a podcast. And you didn't come back with like, oh, you're an idiot. Everybody's doing a podcast. You're like, oh, great. Yeah, man, here's some things I think that would be helpful. I'm like, wow, okay. And, because I listen to, for people who don't know, Matt host. Are you still hosting the podcast? Is it still going?
It's kind of on hiatus. All of that, it's still live. Like you can go back and the feedback that we've gotten is that people go back and listen to older ones and it's still helpful.
Yeah. I agree. For anybody who hasn't found that yet, it's called Stay Curious with Matt Fisher and John Wagler. That is
John Wagler, yeah.
John Wagler. Great podcast. You guys did something probably about a year or so ago now where you went through Chip's 8 feelings.
Mm-hmm.
I will send people to those all the time, man.
Oh,
When it's
cool.
like we're in a session and we don't have a ton of time to get into that. I'm like, go listen to this. It's going to help you work through
That's awesome.
what anger is supposed to be and how you're supposed to actually engage it. So all that to say, I'm grateful for Matt because Matt has done some podcasts for a little bit and he knows, I'm going to say, I think you know what you're doing. At least in the capacity to give me some pointers on what I'm doing. So all that to say, yeah, man, a day one dream, like I gotta talk to Matt here sometime. So I frantically texted him. I was like, hey, Nick's out this Friday. What are you doing? You want to hop on a call? And you're like, sure.
I'm in.
Do it.
Yeah.
Well, stay on standby because I'll probably do this again to you 20 more times in the next 20 weeks. I'm
I'm
kidding.
here whenever. I love to be an auxiliary co-host more than a guest.
Well, I'll lean on you to that. Well, thanks again, Matt. And yeah, we have a closing tradition on the show. We say, don't do this alone. So on the count of 3, we'll say that together to everybody listening. 1, 2, 3. Don't do this alone. And thanks, Riverside, for that terrible delay.
It'll sync up. AI will sync it up. And maybe
AI will
replace
fix it.
us entirely.
Solid. I'm here for it. All right. Till the next time. Hey, thanks for joining us today. If you found this helpful, do us a huge favor and subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Or, better yet, send this to someone who needs encouragement.
For more tools, resources, and information about our coaching, check out rscky.com. Keep showing up.
Yeah,
We'll catch you next time.